At the entrance, she said, "Take care of it for a week." I was puzzled. "What are you talking about?" Suddenly, my self-centered sister-in-law called me. She had left her baby in an eco bag at our entrance, but I had moved out yesterday. As soon as she heard my reply, my sister-in-law started shouting, "I'm overseas. Find it now." I rushed to the house I lived in by car, but the baby was nowhere to be found. I thought I need to call the police. With trembling hands, I took out my cell phone and was about to uncover a truly terrifying fact. I married Scott 10 years ago, and we lived together. We wanted children, but were not blessed with any. Before I knew it, I was 38. My younger sister-in-law, Lindsay, who was 5 years younger, often took advantage of me. Her husband was a president, and my husband worked for his company, which she used to her advantage. It was commonplace for her to ask me to run errands, only a 10-minute drive from our house. Moreover, since she got pregnant, she called me more often, even making me clean the house and prepare dinner. Even though I loved taking care of people, I told my husband that she was being too selfish. But he asked me to keep looking after her for a while, saying, "I'll talk to her about it." "Sometimes sorry, but please help her out," he'd say. It seems my husband was under her husband's influence. So I reluctantly went to Lindsay's house whenever she called. "Ah, my stomach is heavy," she'd say. "Hey, Michelle, don't just sit there. Get the TV remote." What? Although she was only 3½ months pregnant, her belly seemed to be showing more than it should. However, she was naturally plump, so I kept my unnecessary thoughts to myself. "Wouldn't it be better for a safe delivery if you moved around a bit yourself?" I suggested. "Don't give me advice when you've never been pregnant," she snapped. "This baby is going to be our future son. What's wrong with taking good care of him?" She slouched on the sofa, never dropping her arrogant attitude, which gradually wore on my nerves and stressed me out. But when I questioned whether the gender could be determined at 3½ months, she flared up in anger. "You have an old brain. Nowadays, civilization has advanced so much that you can find out the gender right away," with Lindsay insisting as if it were the most natural thing. I didn't feel like arguing back and just listened to her complaints wearily. "You're just jealous because you can't get pregnant," she accused. "It's really bad for the baby's prenatal education. If anything happens to this baby, it's your fault." Eventually, she started using the unborn baby to threaten me. It became suffocating to be with Lindsay, and I continued to go home sighing after quickly finishing what I needed to do. When I talked to my husband after returning from work, he soothed me, saying, "Just bear with it a little longer." Still, I felt uneasy as I went on with my life because it was painful to keep feeling this way. I made excuses whenever Lindsay called and kept refusing her. Then Lindsay complained to my husband that I was being mean to her, which left me completely at a loss. Even if I said I was busy, she wouldn't listen and kept calling me. Eventually, I had to answer the phone, and she screamed in a piercing voice, "Michelle, is it okay if your brother's position at the company gets worse? You haven't forgotten that my husband is the president, right?" My husband was always gentle and kind with the sole intention of not causing him trouble. Feeling like I had no other option, I found myself at Lindsay's place more often. As time passed, Lindsay gave birth to a boy a month before her due date. Moreover, the baby weighed over 140 ounces. Isn't he too big for being born so early? I wondered, but having never been pregnant myself, I assumed it might be possible and accepted it. Lindsay named the child Chris, and predictably, after her discharge, she called me to take care of the baby. "Think of it as practice for when you have your own. Fulfill your duty as a nanny. You might not even get the chance to have one," she remarked. Despite my annoyance with Lindsay, I visited her home every time she called, thinking she must be struggling after just giving birth. Plus, the baby was just too adorable. "Chris, you're such a good boy. Grow up healthy," I coo. Changing diapers for the first time and bathing him, none of it felt like a burden when I saw his face. However, 3 months passed and Lindsay started dropping the baby off at my house more frequently. "What's going on? You're all dressed up," I questioned her once. "I have a dinner with people related to my husband's work. I have to go with him, so you take care of Chris," she replied. As she regained her strength, I realized how busy a president's wife could be, and I diligently took care of the baby. However, the frequency of Lindsay leaving Chris with me started increasing. Thanks for today. Isn't this too much? You're not just accompanying your husband, are you? I asked her one day. Right now, my husband is handling an important business deal, and I'm helping out. You should help too. Lindsay raised her voice, forcing the child on me before quickly leaving. With doubts about whether she was really any help, I couldn't just ignore the baby in front of me, so I took care of him as needed. However, one day was different. When I changed his diaper, Chris had diarrhea. He was energetic and didn't have a fever, so I kept the room warmer than usual to keep him from getting cold. In the evening, when Lindsay came to pick up Chris, I told her about it. She confronted me loudly, accusing, "You useless thing. You did something to Chris out of spite, didn't you?" I shook my head, denying it, just as my husband Scott came home. "What's all this noise in the entryway, Scott?" Lindsay's voice softened, and she started crying, despite always using harsh words towards me. "I understand your feelings, but Michelle doesn't have much experience with child rearing. It might have just been a bit cold today. I'll apologize, so please forgive her," my husband defended me. But I was puzzled as to why I had to apologize when I hadn't done anything wrong. Feeling frustrated, I sent Lindsay and Chris off while preparing dinner in low spirits. Suddenly, my husband became serious and pulled a letter-sized envelope out of his bag. "Michelle, there's something important we need to talk about." "Dinner can wait. Please have a seat," he said, spreading out the documents on the table. The words he told me were hard to believe, especially since I hadn't imagined anything like it. However, understanding his firm resolution, I quietly nodded. A week later, while I was unpacking some boxes, Lindsay called. "I left a bag at your entrance, so take care of him for a week," she said abruptly. "What? What are you talking about?" I responded, confused. "Don't play dumb. It's my baby, of course." "You've already brought him inside, haven't you?" she accused. After hearing the full story, it turned out that since I was not at home, she had put Chris in an eco bag and hung it on the doorknob. Panicked, I said, "Wait a minute, we moved out yesterday. We're not going back to that house. Please go and pick up Chris right away." However, Lindsay didn't believe me, accusing me of lying again. When I insisted it was true with a serious tone, she suddenly panicked. It turned out she had left Chris 5 hours ago. Moreover, I was shocked to learn that she was currently on an overseas trip. Despite it being spring, it was still a chilly day without much warmth. "Go pick up Chris now." "Hurry up," she demanded. More worried about the baby than angry at Lindsay's attitude, I immediately drove off. An hour later, I arrived at our old house and checked the entrance, but there was no sign of Chris. I scoured the garden and asked the neighbors, but no one knew anything. There were no signs of an echo bag, no crying heard. What's going on? Feeling futile without any clues, I was about to call the police when my phone rang. "What? What did you say?" The content of the call was so shocking that I was left speechless. After ending the call, I was so stunned that I just wandered around in a daze until Lindsay called. "He was in the eco bag hung at the entrance, wasn't he?" she asked urgently. "Oh, he's not there. I can't find him anywhere," I replied. "Seriously, this is bad. If we don't find Chris, my husband might divorce me. It will be your fault if we don't find him." Lindsay's voice trembled over the phone, revealing her panic. Realizing there was nothing else to be done, I offered to report to the police and ask for help. But Lindsay adamantly refused, fearing it would become a big deal and her husband would find out. "Chris's safety is more important than your reputation. Chris is just a tool to extract money from my husband," she revealed selfishly. Unconcerned about me, I could hear Lindsay talking with someone she was with. After a while, Lindsay lamented, "This trip is ruined. I couldn't get a flight today, but I'm coming back tomorrow. Don't tell my husband anything. If you find Chris, contact me immediately. I'll do what I can." After hearing my response, Lindsay seemed satisfied and hung up the phone. The next day, as I waited for her at the airport, she appeared arm in arm with a man. Seeing me, she approached with a displeased look. "Michelle, what are you doing here? Did you find Chris? I came to tell you something important. Chris has gone somewhere you can't reach." "It's too late," I said with a downcast and sad expression. Lindsay began to panic. "You're lying. What am I supposed to tell my husband, you useless thing? Find a baby that looks like him right now," she demanded, enraged and devastated. "How can you say that? Are you even a mother?" Overwhelmed with anger and sadness, tears started to flow. However, I quickly wiped my tears and firmly met her gaze. Instead of looking for a similar child, talk to this person, I said. As I said this, a woman who had been hiding behind me, wearing her hood deep over her face, shook herself. Not just Lindsay, but the man with her started trembling. Yes, this woman was the wife of Lindsay's affair partner. The man was too shocked to move, and as his wife confronted him, yelling, "You scum, I'll knock some sense into you," he pleaded pathetically, "Please forgive me." But his wife was unforgiving, telling him to bite down hard, and then she slapped him back and forth. The force was so tremendous that passers-by stopped in their tracks. She left the man, who had collapsed while clutching his cheek, and then turned to face Lindsay. Lindsay quickly stepped back and began to speak rapidly. "Listen, don't get it wrong. We're not in that kind of relationship." "What?" "Hey, Michelle, stop recording with your smartphone." Despite her attempt to deceive, seeing me holding up my smartphone to record the scene, Lindsay snapped back. However, I continued to record. I remained calm. "Then how do you explain this?" I pulled out an envelope I had brought with me containing emails between Lindsay and her affair partner, as well as cozy photos of them I found on social media. Lindsay attempted to forcibly take these from me, glaring menacingly. "Snooping around like that is the lowest. How did you find his wife's contact information?" "I actually met his wife by chance," I replied. "When I saw Lindsay's affair partner on social media, his face seemed familiar. After racking my brain, I realized he was the husband of the woman who works at my regular hair salon. He too was a hairstylist, but unlike his wife, who was successful and owned several shops and was skilled in a technique she was known for, he was known for not working and just playing around. He was a typical husband sponging off his wife. When I told his wife about Lindsay's affair trip, she said, 'I've reached my limit. I'm joining in.' She came with me, usually gentle and kind. I was honestly surprised at how terrifying she could be when angry. Such a playboy hairstylist couldn't stand up to his wife and kept rubbing his hands together like a fly, repeatedly begging, 'Please don't divorce me.' Watching her steadfast refusal, I felt a strong resolve. Moreover, was Chris born from the affair? I continued. "What? Don't just make things up without proof," Lindsay snapped back. "But he was born a month early and weighed over 140 ounces. That's definitely too big. You've been fudging the weeks, haven't you?" While saying this, I pulled out another envelope and showed her the documents inside. One was a maternal and child health handbook, and another document proved that Lindsay's husband was not Chris's biological father. "You play dirty. But if I tear this up, it's like nothing ever happened," Lindsay declared, snatching the DNA test results from my hand and tearing them up on the spot, looking pleased with herself. She probably thought she could get away with it, but that wasn't going to happen. "You better talk directly to the person who gave me these documents." I turned my smartphone towards Lindsay, and she opened her eyes and mouth wide, as if she was about to scream. No wonder, the screen showed Lindsay's husband. I wasn't recording. I was on a video call with Lindsay's husband. "Lindsay, you lied about going to your parents' house and deceived me," he said sternly. "Well, so you know," she stammered, not making any sense in response. Standing in front of her, I slowly began to speak. "Listen carefully. I'm going to explain everything one by one. A week ago, her husband, suspecting something, had requested a DNA test between himself and Chris. After finding emails between Lindsay and her lover at the same time, he lied about going on a business trip for a week to monitor her actions. Lindsay, not knowing this, immediately contacted her lover by email and booked an overseas trip online in a rush. She didn't even think to clear her browsing history on the day of the trip. After placing Chris in an eco bag and hanging it at the entrance of the house I was living in, Lindsay skipped off to the station, humming a tune. Her husband followed her and took care of Chris. If he had been left at the entrance for over 5 hours, who knows what could have happened. "So Chris is alive?" Lindsay's husband asked. "Yes, he's with me now." The call I was about to make to the police when I couldn't find Chris was from Lindsay's husband, I explained. Surprised but eager to understand the situation fully, I immediately went to his house. Chris was full of energy, flapping his arms and legs as he played with a rattle. While hearing about the past events, I remembered that despite being born a month early, he weighed over 140 ounces. At the time, I reluctantly accepted it, but I indeed thought it was strange. With Lindsay's husband's permission, I searched through Lindsay's belongings and found her maternal and child health handbook. Looking at its contents, I began to piece together the truth. I discovered that Lindsay had falsified the baby's weeks. Why did Lindsay do such a thing? Looking back at the actual timing of her pregnancy, it was exactly when her husband was away on a long business trip for about 2 months. Therefore, it was impossible for him to be the father of the baby. Realizing that she was pregnant with her lover's child, Lindsay thought she could deceive everyone by fudging the birth month, especially since the baby turned out to be an unexpectedly big baby. That's when I became suspicious. Then the lover, now exposed even about the child, began apologizing profusely to his wife. However, his wife coldly said, "You'll have to live on your own strength from now on," and slammed a divorce paper down on the spot as she kicked her crying husband and walked away. There was a refreshing certainty in her stride. Meanwhile, Lindsay's husband did not remain silent. "Of course I'm divorcing you. Go be with that man," he declared. "No, I just liked his face. He has no money. You were with me just for the money, right?" Caught in the truth, Lindsay choked up. "You said Chris was just a means to get money from your husband." "Don't spout nonsense," her husband retorted. I had recorded everything to prevent Lindsay from denying it later. Lindsay's husband had been silently listening to our conversation until then, his face flushed with deep furrows between his brows. Confronted with the unexpected truth, Lindsay seemed to tremble slightly, but then, as if remembering something, she peered into her smartphone screen. "If Chris is okay, then it's all good, right? Besides, even if we're not related by blood, I gave birth to him. So he's as good as your child," Lindsay argued, looking smug. Both Lindsay's husband and I inadvertently exclaimed, "What?" at her pathetically selfish justification. "This is the end." Lindsay's husband abruptly hung up the phone. "What are you going to do about this? I did everything you told me to do, didn't I? Didn't you like it?" Lindsay tried to call her husband from her smartphone, but he had blocked her calls. "More importantly, Lindsay, did you know that leaving Chris in an eco bag and going out is a crime?" I asked, shaking my head vigorously. I showed her what kind of crime was on my smartphone screen, and she suddenly began to tremble and collapse on the spot. "Lindsay, this is goodbye for us." "Farewell," I said coldly. After giving her a cold look, I walked away, feeling a chill. When I turned around, Lindsay's eyes were bloodshot, and her brows twitched as she made a terrifying face. "I'll tell Scott this happened because you moved without telling me," she shouted, desperate. "It was my husband who decided to move because he pitied me being exploited by you. He knows everything about this incident too. He said he never wants to see you again." Thinking her brother was her last ally, Lindsay screamed loudly when she realized he had abandoned her. It's incredible how selfish one can be, never once thinking about Chris. This is no time to cry. Go pick up Chris right now. If I'm getting divorced, I don't need the baby. What kind of person are you? I retorted. I will never forget what you just said. Chris will never go back to you, no matter what. Having declared my separation from my hopelessly awful sister-in-law, I walked away with a firm resolution in my heart. Later, I reported the incident of Lindsay abandoning the baby to the police. Even though he was quickly protected, the act was deemed too cruel, and Lindsay was severely reprimanded by the police. Lindsay ended up being divorced by her husband and disowned by her own family, becoming utterly alone. She was sued by her ex-husband for child abandonment and tricking her child's father, demanding $30,000. She and her lover had to borrow money to pay the settlement, and because they borrowed from a dubious company, she ended up working in a shady place to repay the debt. My resolution was to raise Chris as my own child. When I told this to my husband, he happily agreed. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, I am also expecting a new life. I will raise these children carefully so they can live freely and happily.